Max Verstappen turned a 104-point championship deficit into a 12-point gap with just one race remaining in the 2025 Formula One season, pulling off what stands as the greatest comeback the sport has ever seen. August 31st, 2025. Max Verstappen arrives at the Dutch Grand Prix fresh off the summer break, determined to deliver for the home crowd after a miserable showing in Hungary earlier that month. The start goes brilliantly, though he nearly launches the car into orbit through turn 3 and somehow settles into second place. One McLaren stays behind him for a while before the inevitable overtake comes, and from there the race stagnates with nothing happening until Lando Norris suffers a mechanical failure that promotes Verstappen back to second. Not quite a win, but the maximum result has been achieved, and that becomes Max's target for every remaining race, because at this stage, the championship looks like a massive long shot. 104 points separate him from championship leader Oscar Piastri, a deficit that simply cannot be overturned. Fast forward to now, and only one race remains, with the gap standing at just 12 points. So how did we get here? Since the summer break, Max Verstappen has finished on the podium in every single race. Monza and Baku brought double victories, Austin delivered a clean sweep of the entire weekend, and Vegas, followed by Qatar, gave him back-to-back wins again. Ever since Zandvoort, he's been hunting those McLarens like a starved animal chasing prey, pressing the papaya cars race after race, and forcing their pit wall into decisions that make absolutely no sense. All the while, he just keeps creeping up behind them, closing the distance. Every time a McLaren driver glances in their mirrors, that ominous Red Bull liveried #1 car fills the view with a madman behind the wheel. Verstappen doesn't just want to beat his competition, he wants to destroy them. Vulnerability triggers something ruthless in him where he pushes harder, brakes later, and stretches the gap until it stops being a contest. Making a statement matters to him, reminding everybody exactly who they're dealing with, and when he senses weakness, there's no charity, no mercy, no letting others stay in the fight. Red Bull showed up at the Italian Grand Prix actually quicker than McLaren for the first time in ages. The gamble came with an extremely low downforce setup that cost them time through Monza's few corners, but on the straights, they were flying, and that powered Verstappen to his 5th pole position of the season. Norris grabbed the lead at the start, but Max regained it quickly after in a move that proved necessary given how much clean air matters, and from that point, he never looked back to secure his 3rd victory of the season. The thing is, most people expected McLaren to struggle here. Low downforce tracks where straight line speed dominates have never suited them well, so heading into Baku, everyone anticipated they'd return to their usual dominant form. Qualifying turned into a disaster, with McLaren's drivers starting down in 7th and 9th, while Max took pole, because of course he did. Multi-world champions understand the value of capitalizing when rivals are struggling. Never interrupt your enemy while he's making a mistake, and that weekend, McLaren made a whole heap of them. Verstappen's pace was absolutely mighty as he dominated from lights to flag and bagged another Grand Chelem in the process, which honestly, what more could you ask of him? Red Bull had started understanding their car much better than earlier in the season, and with Macias now as team principal, they'd found new ways of unlocking potential from the RB21. Monza saw them gamble with a trimmed rear wing, Baku brought the same approach, and overall, they had the fastest package. Both McLarens should have been on the podium at minimum, which makes Baku such a massive turning point, a proper punch in the gut that turns the fight around for the guy on the back foot. McLaren fumbled, stumbled, crumbled, whatever you want to call it, and Max wasted zero time taking full advantage. Qualifying determined everything in Singapore, and George Russell pulled off the lap of his life to secure pole before going on to win ahead of the 3 title contenders. Russell has disrupted this championship fight all season, finishing ahead of Verstappen in both Canada and Singapore, which actually helped McLaren since they struggled on both weekends. Max closed the gap with 2nd place, but still sat a long way from leading the championship at 63 points behind Piastri and 41 off Norris. Another incident would need to happen for him to claw back enough points to be considered a real threat. Austin's sprint race delivered with a McLaren double DNF that handed Max another 8 points against his rivals. And then the main race added salt to the wound when he won and carved another chunk out of Piastri's lead. 63 points down became just 40 against the Australian, while the gap to Norris dropped from 41 to only 26. At this rate, he'd be leading the championship by Vegas. Mexico arrives next. Normally a happy hunting ground for Red Bull, but this isn't Max's finest day at the office. Fortune smiles on him when he avoids a penalty for the Hamilton collision and for leaving the track while gaining an advantage, just as Leclerc also controversially escapes punishment, and both drivers end up on the podium that day. Norris wins the Grand Prix though, and things start swinging back McLaren's way. Red Bull needs a huge weekend in Brazil to make up lost ground because they can't afford to surrender more points if this comeback has any chance of happening. The Brazilian Grand Prix sees them arrive with a decent car that's still not quick enough to beat McLaren. Friday's only practice session leaves them unhappy with the setup, which translates into a mere 6th place in sprint qualifying, and since Parc Fermé rules prevent changes until the main qualifying session, Verstappen experiences the same ride issues in the sprint race that don't help him climb up the order much. The team decides to revert to the old floor, raise the ride height, and soften the car to improve the experience. And while that solves the ride quality problems, it makes the car completely undrivable. Sliding around constantly, Max has to underdrive the car and gets eliminated from Q1 as a result. High risk should bring high reward, but in this case, the gamble backfires massively. That doesn't change the team's mindset one bit. If anything, they feel even more comfortable taking a risk with a complete setup overhaul since they've got nothing left to lose, and after 3 attempts, they finally get it right. Race day sees Max driving like a man possessed. The lights go out, and he's immediately on a charge, though an early puncture forces a premature stop that ends up being a blessing in disguise because he'd reported having no pace on the hard tire initially. Red Bull originally planned to go as long as possible into the race, but that puncture leads them to find the fastest strategy available, which means exploiting the medium tire as much as possible. When those mediums go on, you'd see him fly past and then never see him again. Lightning fast pace carries him through the Grand Prix until he finishes only 10 seconds behind eventual winner Lando Norris, leaving everybody in awe of such a tremendous comeback while also wondering what could have been. With the right setup from the start of the weekend, Max easily could have won with that kind of pace. Then again, they probably wouldn't have found that level of performance without making all those previous mistakes throughout the weekend. Sao Paulo showed us Max's mentality at its finest with that drive from the pit lane to 3rd place. Sebastian Vettel in Abu Dhabi 2012 comes to mind as a comparison, where Vettel put together a phenomenal world-class performance and told his team principal with complete confidence that he'd see them on the podium when the championship was on the line. A couple years later, at the Hungarian Grand Prix in 2014, Lewis Hamilton came back from the pit lane in an early crash to finish 3rd after an engine failure in qualifying, and that happened around the Hungaroring, which is notoriously one of the most difficult tracks to overtake on. Both those drivers won the championship in those years. Lando Norris takes the championship lead with just 3 races remaining after his run from Mexico to Sao Paulo, despite Max's best efforts to stay in the hunt. The gap between Max and 1st place extends to 49 points, which means another extraordinary event needs to happen for him to still win the title. Lando grabs pole position again with the supreme lap in the wet, while Verstappen joins him on the front row. The lights go out and the Dutchman gets the better launch off the line. Norris tries covering the inside but outbrakes himself and loses a couple positions, though he manages to recover to 2nd in the end, which minimizes the points deficit. Verstappen's faultless drive brings his 6th victory of the season, doing exactly what he needed to do. The gap to the championship leader still stands at 42 points though. Then breaking news arrives from the paddock.
We've got some breaking news here in the paddock. McLaren's Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri have been disqualified from the Las Vegas Grand Prix.
Like I said, never interrupt your enemy while he's making a mistake. McLaren has built up a highlight reel of self-sabotage over the second half of the season, and the Vegas disqualification simply adds to a growing pattern of a team cracking under the pressure of leading a championship fight. Max doesn't have to do anything except stand back and watch the chaos unfold. Under any normal title campaign, a 42-point deficit with 2 races remaining means you might as well forget it. You only close that kind of gap through a mixture of relentless performances and a good chunk of luck. But you make your own luck, as they say. McLaren are serving him the championship on a silver platter, handing him a lifeline he wouldn't get against more formidable opponents. Technical infringements, strategy misfires, operational blunders, the kind of unforced errors top teams cannot afford keep happening again and again right when the stakes reach their highest. Max is the worst possible driver to give that kind of oxygen to because once he senses cracks in the armor, he acts rapidly and with extreme precision, always there to pick up the pieces. That 42-point gap suddenly becomes just 24 points heading into Qatar. McLaren have always gone extremely well at this track and were expected to secure a straightforward 1-2. Sprint qualifying sees Verstappen make a mistake on his first SQ3 run by going off track and damaging the floor. 4th place in the sprint race follows, then he gets his lap together well for qualifying later that day, though it's only good enough for 3rd, which still gives him a solid position to fight from. The lights go out and Max moves into 2nd place, a necessary overtake since he needs to finish ahead of Norris to keep his title hopes alive. Everything settles down until Nico Hülkenberg and Pierre Gasly come together and bring out the safety car. Most teams would normally stay out because it's too early to switch from mediums to another tire under normal circumstances, but this specific race was made to be a mandatory 2-stop, which makes this effectively an open goal, a completely free, cheap pit stop that strategists dream about. This wasn't some 50-50 gamble or bold roll of the dice. The easiest call ever sat right in front of them with a mandatory 2-stop race and a safety car on track, practically a neon billboard screaming box now. Every team on the grid read the message loud and clear except McLaren. Somehow, someway, they managed to miss the open goal from 2 yards out. The rest of the field dove in without hesitation while McLaren hesitated, blinked, second-guessed themselves, and then did nothing. Hungary 2021 comes to mind where Mercedes decided not to box Lewis when the track was bone dry. That same jaw-dropping moment of how on earth did they get that so wrong? The McLaren strategy team have been cosplaying Ferrari all season long and it cost them track position. What should have been a guaranteed podium, maybe even a 1-2, evaporated instantly. They handed Max Verstappen another gift. Another silver platter moment where all he had to do was say thank you very much and drive off into the sunset, which put him right back into striking range with just a 12-point deficit to championship leader Norris. 2007 feels like it's happening all over again. McLaren internally falling apart, while an outside contender takes the title away from both their drivers, a feat that seems entirely feasible for Verstappen. Weekend by weekend, he's been chipping away at that gap, steadily racking up the points. Max Verstappen possesses a win at all costs mindset. He never backs down from a fight and refuses to ever say die, which means no lead is ever safe with him around. Talent only gets you so far, but hard work, dedication, and resilience transform that talent into genius. People tend to pedestalize natural gifts more than anything else. But what separates those who reach heights their competitors cannot is a certain mindset, a way of thinking and approaching challenges that makes them formidable and ruthlessly consistent. That mindset enables them to just show up and deliver. Max Verstappen hasn't led the Drivers' Championship at any stage this season, a position similar to where a certain Red Bull driver found himself 15 years ago. The 2010 Formula One season ranks as one of the most hotly contested championships in the sport's history. 5 different drivers gunned for the title throughout the season, and going into the final race, 4 drivers still had a mathematical shot at winning. Mark Webber, Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso, and Sebastian Vettel. Victory in Korea made things look good for Alonso to secure his 3rd world title. Mark Webber was his closest challenger, but crashed in that very race and lost his championship lead, though he still sat only 11 points behind the Spaniard. His teammate Sebastian Vettel had it worse, retiring with a power unit failure from the lead with just 10 laps remaining, which dropped him to 4th in the driver's standings and 25 points away from the championship leader with 2 races to go. Max this season was 24 points back with 2 races left, nearly the same situation. Vettel went on to win both final races and beat Alonso to the championship from what seemed like impossible circumstances, as we know now. The Dutchman finds himself in a similar boat. Vegas brought a win. Qatar delivered another. Abu Dhabi could bring a third. If he wins Abu Dhabi, Norris needs to finish 3rd at worst to claim the title, which in theory should be doable. But given how everything has ebbed and flowed this year, that's way easier said than done, and there's still every opportunity for Max to snatch it from under their noses. Especially when you throw him a bone like that. He can smell blood in the water now, and best believe he's not going to let up. His mentality stands as one of his strongest qualities as a driver. But once again, it all depends on McLaren. Another bag, fumble, and Verstappen is champion. This is the day that could rewrite the story you thought was already finished. The day where the impossible comeback becomes real. The day that might change the course of Formula One history forever. From 104 points down to 12 points with 1 race remaining, from a position where the championship seemed like a fantasy to standing on the brink of pulling off the greatest comeback Formula One has ever witnessed. Max Verstappen has shown that with relentless determination, ruthless precision, and an opponent willing to self-destruct, no deficit is truly insurmountable. The impossible is about to become reality. It's the D-Day, and Max Verstappen lines up on pole position at the Yas Marina circuit with the Papaya Boys right behind him. The mathematics are brutally simple. Norris holds a 12-point advantage, which means a podium finish guarantees him the title regardless of what Verstappen does. The lights go out, and Verstappen gets a perfect start, immediately building a gap as Piastri makes an aggressive move on Norris for 2nd place on the opening lap. From there, Max drives like a madman, extending his lead with every passing lap and putting together the kind of commanding performance that's defined his entire career. The Red Bull is absolutely untouchable on pace, and by mid-race he's built a gap of over 12 seconds. Verstappen controls the race from lights to flag, claiming his 71st career victory and 8th win of the season, doing everything humanly possible to keep his championship hopes alive. Behind him, Norris settles into 3rd place and manages the pressure perfectly, executing a clean 2-stop strategy that keeps him ahead of Leclerc's Ferrari. When the checkered flag falls, Verstappen has won the race, but Norris crosses the line in 3rd, and that's enough. The final championship margin is just 2 points. From 104 points down after the summer break to losing the championship by just 2 points in Abu Dhabi. Verstappen won more races than anyone this season with 8 victories, closed a gap that seemed impossible to overcome, and drove with the kind of relentless brilliance that's made him one of the all-time greats. But sometimes, in sport, consistency beats late-season heroics, and Lando Norris is your 2025 Formula One World Champion. The impossible comeback fell agonizingly short. 2 points. That's the difference between 5 consecutive titles and watching someone else lift the trophy. What we witnessed was still one of the greatest championship battles in Formula One history. A season that will be talked about for decades to come. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more Formula One content. Drop a comment below and let me know what you thought of this championship battle. I'll see you in the next one.